Hey everyone, my name is Rio, and welcome back to another episode of the Indie Game Devlog, where I go over the development of my game, Orb. So this is going to be the first episode with a slightly different style to it, like I discussed in the previous episode, so let me know if you guys like this newer style or not. Anyways, let's get into it. Now, right off the bat, I do want to mention that I've been rather busy lately due to final exams and projects around it. Although, I have been able to do some things with what little free time I have. Mainly, I've been working on making and texturing models, and giving them a design that I can call final, at least. So one of the first things I did was finish the button model. The model itself is actually finished already for quite some time. I just needed to add a material to it, which I've been actually struggling with trying to find a design for it, although I'm pretty happy with what I got now. In a previous episode, I did mention that I wasn't going to use Substance Painter for texturing. However, I actually ended up changing my mind, mainly due to the fact that I now have access to the newest version of Substance Painter. I actually used to own a relatively old version, and exactly when I bought, and just as I bought it, like 2 days after, they released a new version. Anyways, with the newest version that I now have access to, I enjoy using it a lot more than the older one, so I ended up switching back to it, and with the results I've gotten so far, I'm quite happy with them actually. So I finished the model and added the textures in Substance, and added it to the game already. Another thing I actually changed was the button mechanic itself. Normally I had two different versions of the button, one which was like a toggleable button, and the other was a button that you can only press one time. I ended up combining the two blueprints into one and just having it be a checkbox. It is a lot easier and a lot more convenient. Although I am thinking about maybe swapping out the non-toggleable button for something like a switch, because as it stands, there's no visual indicator for what type of button you'll be pressing. But for the time being, I'm really happy with how this looks, and the design itself probably isn't going to change a lot. Might make some slight adjustments, but overall this is the final design. Now I also added a, new mechanic and a model to the game, which has been my arch nemesis since the start of development. Elevators. Let me explain. I had a lot of trouble designing elevators for Orb. The demo alone went through like 5 or 6 different designs. I actually kind of want to show you guys these old ones, if I can still find them, that is. Okay, now I didn't find all elevators. I ended up with like 4 designs that I found. It was interesting going over them because you can really get a sense of progression when it comes down to my modeling and texturing over time. So it's quite nice looking back at this actually. So this is the first one that I made. Yes, I know it's terrible. This was never used, of course, for the actual version of Orb, but in the beginning section it actually used to look a lot different, and if I can, I'll pull up some footage from it. You had normally a giant elevator that you were supposed to go in the beginning, and the layout was completely different and a lot worse in my opinion, but either way, I quickly scrapped that one. Now this is the second version. I like this one a lot more already. Had a nice door design. It was quite fun, but it didn't really work. The proportions were kind of off. I liked the animation that I added to it, but overall wasn't really that great of a model. Then you actually end up with the elevator that I used for the demo, which I'm a lot happier with already, compared to the other two at least. And this one originally actually had a door, which ended up being scrapped, as you can see here. The door wasn't supposed to look like this. I had a different model for the door, but I couldn't really find it again, sadly enough. The reason it was actually cut was because there were some issues with collision, and overall it was just easier to do it without the door. But either way, you guys have seen this one already. And next is the version that is gonna be in the full version, is this one. As you can see, for the full version, I decided to change the design quite a bit. The original models always tend to be circular, so I actually ended up going for a more industrial and realistic design. Which is what I'm going for the whole game, of course. It might look a bit empty right now, but I do plan on adding some props in the elevator, like a monitor in the back or something. Yeah, overall, I'm pretty happy with how this one looks so far. It's not exactly anything complicated, but I do think it is an improvement over what the old models look like. And I do think that I have gotten a bit better at modeling and texturing over time. Now, I also heavily improved on the mechanical aspect of the elevators, really. The old one was just a platform that would rise up to a trigger box and load up the next level. While the new blueprint system can function more like an actual elevator, and I do plan on using it outside of just the end and beginning of levels. Now, one of the first things I made sure, of course, was that you can't jump in, activate it, jump back out before the doors close. Now, the addition of the elevator itself has really motivated me a lot more since, for this, the levels worked technically, but they were just disconnected. You had to like load up one to play it and then load up the next one. There was no transition between them. With the elevator, I now have a smooth transition and it allows me to play the levels in one session, and it makes it feel more whole. Although, this does make me think about the more technical aspect of connecting levels. Now, if you don't want to hear much about how Unreal Engine works, you can just skip to this timestamp in the video. Alright, so when working with multiple levels in Unreal, you can simply load a level. However, that will pretty much always happen in a black screen, which is how it worked in the demo, of course. For the full version, I actually want to have proper loading screens that perhaps could like change per chapter. Although, to achieve this, you do need to use a different way of loading in levels called level streaming. The way that this works is that you have one main file which has the actual levels as subsections of that file. And from there you can load and unload them individually. I've personally had a bit of trouble trying to figure out level streaming as a whole, but I do want to use it for the final version. Currently my plan is to make it easier to have several main levels, one main level per chapter. That way I don't really need a super large list of levels in one file, instead I can break it down into individual pieces. This also works itself nicely into the story. For example, at the end of chapter 1, you don't enter an actual elevator to be greeted by a loading screen, instead you pick up the new version of the orb and it ends with a bright flash. I think that having different loading screens and having a different transition for like an actual chapter could be a fun thing to have. Of course, I still have to experiment with this a bit. Anyways, last but not least, I ended up redesigning the power cell altogether. Again. Now, don't worry, this is the last redesign and it is pretty much final. Now, this is the original model from the demo, which looks okay. This was the first redesign for the full version of the game, which looking back on it, wasn't really finished to begin with. And I'm glad to say that this is the final design of the power cell. Personally, I'm really happy how it turned out. I wanted to streamline the model a bit and dial back the glowing parts of it to give it a slightly more realistic look, because in the first one, this section as a whole doesn't really make much sense. Right now, looking at the old and new models and comparing them, I do think that I've gotten a bit better at making props and textures, which definitely motivates me. I've learned a lot about game development and 3D modeling since I've been going to university, and I can't wait to put it to use. That's all for now. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like. If you want to join me on the journey of developing Orb, feel free to subscribe. And if you want more updates outside of YouTube, consider joining our Discord. See you in the next one.